started first with an approval of the minutes. Are there any changes or motion?
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, the minutes are approved. And we will jump into updates and reports. Brenda.
All right. First of all, I want to thank you, the committee, for allowing us to do this by take Donahue across to Denver, and then he'll be in town for the city council meeting November 27th to give a fuller report and more of a draft review. Mayor, can you hear? Are you ready?
I can hear you.
Okay. So, were you able to get the staff report? It was inadvertently not.
I did not, it got sent to me. I use the stuff that's on the website, and I don't think it's on the website.
It is now.
It is currently, yeah, I haven't seen one.
Okay, so I'm gonna let Spear go ahead and get started, so that he can have his 10 minutes, and then you can ask questions, and we'll just jump in however you need us to answer questions. So, thank you. Mayor?
Thank you very much, Brenda. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, we can't.
Say it again.
Can we actually, I hate, we can't do that for a second, can we turn off the heat?
No.
Oh, sorry. Only for Thank you. All right, go ahead, that's still there, it's gonna be some microphone.
Okay. I will, I have a very short presentation today to summarize the draft results of the 2018 City of Asheville Disparity Study. The presentation itself is pretty short and very much a high-level summary of what we found. So I will leave in your hands in terms of whether you want to wait till the end with questions or interrupt me as we go along, assuming that I can hear you, but I'm sure Brenda can let me know if someone's got a question. Just so in case we haven't seen each other in several months, in case you forgot who I am, my name is Samir Bawa. I was the principal in charge of the disparity study. So I was primarily responsible for the task that we completed as part of the study, as well as the results and the interpretation of the results as well. So as part of the study itself, our primary objective was to assess whether minority and women-owned businesses face any barriers as part of the city's contracting practices. And those barriers could be within the city's policies itself or throughout the marketplace in the local region, which we define as Buncombe County and 9 other counties surrounding Buncombe as sort of our relevant geographic area of the city. At the core of the study, what we were really interested in was to basically home in on 3 essential methods as part of disparity studies. One is called the utilization analysis, and that is designed to measure the participation of minority and women-owned businesses in city contracts and procurements, and that's regardless of whether those minority and women-owned businesses are certified as such through the state of North Carolina. We also analyzed or conducted an availability analysis, which provides us with an estimate of the dollars we would expect minority and women-owned businesses to receive based on the types of work they do, the size of the contracts they can work on, their interest in working for the city, so forth and so on. And we also conducted what's called a disparity analysis, which assesses whether there are any differences between the actual participation of minority and women-owned businesses and their estimated availability for that work in the marketplace. So beginning with the utilization analysis, here again we were trying to measure or calculate the percentage of the dollars that actually went to minority and women-owned businesses. We began that analysis with a combination of both city data, so the city provided us with information on all the prime contracts as well as subcontracts that they awarded during our study period, which was July 1st, 2012 through June 30th, 2017. And we collected information on all the contracting that the city executed during that time period in all relevant industries, so construction, professional services, goods, and general services. We then went out in the field and conducted some survey work of our own, so that for each business, each relevant business that participated in a city contract during the study period, we were able to collect two key pieces of information. First, their primary lines of work, so that we can classify each contract appropriately. And then second, and importantly, the race, ethnicity, and gender of their owner. Once we collected that information, we integrated it with the information that we had initially collected from the city, and that put us in position to estimate the percentage of dollars that actually went to minority and women-owned businesses during our study period. So over that time period, we looked at $118 million of prime contracts and subcontracting dollars across the four relevant industries that we studied. And what our analysis showed is that 10.4% of those dollars, or $12.3 million, went to minority and woman-owned businesses. Now, as you see to the right of this pie chart, the lion's share of those dollars went to non-Hispanic, white woman-owned businesses, so they accounted for 8.8 of that 10.4%. And then Asian Americans showed very little participation. Black Americans had 0.5%, Hispanic Americans at 1.1%, and Native Americans at 0.1%. Does anyone have any questions on that?
Just one question. I realize you've done this for us. How does this benchmark for other cities of our size? Can you give us any context for how these numbers stack up against other cities like Asheville?
You know, it's a tough question to answer only because for a couple of reasons. One is that obviously different municipalities, different cities exist in different contracting and demographic realities. So comparing you to work that we've done in, say, the city of Charlotte or the city of Los Angeles, the city of Virginia Beach, it's hard to do that only because the population of minority and women-owned businesses in those areas are so much larger, or at least so much different from Asheville. But I think the best way to benchmark how Asheville is doing in terms of minority and women-owned business participation is really something that's built into the disparity study itself, which is comparing it to the availability of minority and women-owned businesses out in the marketplace. So not so much how do the dollars stack up against other cities, but how do these dollars stack up against dollars we would expect minority and women-owned businesses to receive in the marketplace, given their existence, given the type of contracts they work on, and the size of contracts they can work on.
Okay, keep going.
So that serves as a wonderful segue, because the next piece of disparity study was in fact what we call the availability analysis, which was designed to answer that very question. So how many dollars would you expect minority and women-owned businesses to receive on city contracts based on their presence in your local marketplace? So in order to conduct the availability analysis, once we had compiled information about the types of contracts that the city awards, the size of contracts that they award, as well as determined the relevant geographic market area for the study, we went out into the marketplace and conducted what we call availability telephone surveys with a phone book of businesses that we identified through a variety of different data sources who do work that is relevant to the types of work that the city contracts for, and who have a location within our 10-county relevant geographic market area. Now, we went through and tried to call each and every one of those businesses for the availability survey. Of course, we weren't successful with all of them, but we had nearly 400 businesses who conducted 15 to 20-minute surveys with us. And as part of those surveys, we collected a great deal of information that allowed us to assess availability for each individual prime contract and subcontract that the city awarded during our study period. So as part of those surveys, we asked them about their primary lines of work, the year in which they were established, their geography in terms of where or whether they serve customers within the city's relevant geographic market area, their interest in working for the city in the future, their role as either prime contractors or subcontractors, their capacity to actually bid on city work. So We assess that in terms of what's the largest contract they've ever been on or been awarded in the past, and then the race ethnicity and gender of their owners. Once we collected all that information on all the businesses that completed a survey with us, we were able to develop what we call an availability database. And then based on a match between an individual firm's characteristics and the characteristics of every prime contract and subcontract that the city awarded during the study period, we were able to assess availability on a contract-by-contract basis, and then aggregate those availability estimates in a dollar-weighted way, so that we had an overall estimate of the percentage of dollars that minority and women-owned businesses would be expected to receive based on their availability, and we could disaggregate that information in a variety of different ways, so that for every result we have from the utilization analysis, we now had a benchmark to compare it against based on our availability analysis. So going back to that $118 million of contracting that we looked at, and going back to your question about how this benchmarks against appropriate information, what our analysis suggested is that 12.8% of the city's dollars might be expected to go to minority and women-owned businesses out in the marketplace. So that amounts to about 15 million of the 118 million that the city spent during our study period. Just as with utilization, the group with the largest availability was non-Hispanic white women-owned businesses. They showed an availability of 5.5%. Black American-owned businesses showed availability of 2.1%, Native American of 3.4%, and then Asian American, Hispanic American just under 1%. Any questions I can answer on the availability results?
When you present this to council, I realize this is a summary. Would you also be able to sort of disaggregate some of that? I mean, this is all the contracts together. Are there differences in terms of this? Did you see any differences in terms of the type of contract that was awarded, whether it was construction or professional services or whatever? Were there differences there that were material that you think we should be aware of?
Yeah, that's a great question. And throughout the report, we summarize a lot of that, but I can give you sort of some of the differences. And they're in some ways a lot what we would have expected heading into this. So one disaggregation of that was construction versus all non-construction contracts. The reason why we looked at non-construction combined, that includes professional services, goods, and general services, is because the vast majority of the dollars that we examined as part of the disparity study were construction. And if we were to further disaggregate professional services, goods, and general services, you get such small populations of contracts that it becomes difficult to say anything statistically valid about those. But looking at construction versus non-construction, what you see is availability is much larger for non-construction work than construction. So 2 notes on that. 1, the majority of where the city spends its contracting dollars actually is in construction, and availability for those contracts is about 7%. Availability, as I said, I don't remember the exact number, and my screen's tied up with the presentation, I can look at this afterwards. Availability was substantially higher for non-construction contracts, and among other reasons, one reason is that construction contracts tend to be much larger in size than non-construction contracts, at least the ones the city awards, and those tend to be, because of their size, less accessible to minority and women-owned businesses in general, because minority and women-owned businesses tend to be smaller in general than other businesses, and a large percentage of them are small businesses in nature. Similarly, we looked at prime contracts versus subcontracts. Again, for similar reasons, availability was much higher for subcontracts than prime contracts because subcontracts are much smaller in size than prime contracts, and those tend to be a lot more accessible to minority and women-owned businesses, generally speaking, than large prime contracts working directly with the city. So we have different disaggregations like that. I can work with Brenda, and I'm happy to present some disaggregated results as you think appropriate for the larger council.
One of the questions I'm interested in terms of disaggregation is, let's just say for the Native American
not so much the availability, but on the real dollar spend, is that, how many firms is that? Is that one firm that's getting that big percentage, you know, that chunk of, or is it 5 firms that are sharing that chunk of money?
Yeah, and we have results around that question, the disparity study as well. There's a funny, so with availability here, there's a funny thing about Native Americans in particular. So we looked over the Native American number time and time again because that strikes us as remarkably high, given the other groups, as well as given the population statistics in Western North Carolina, although population statistics are certainly a flawed metric in terms of what business availability looks like for a variety of reasons. But there's actually one Native American-owned business. Brenda, can you remind me of the name of the big Native American-owned business?
Al Construction? Al.
They completed an availability survey with us, and they're big players in the marketplace and happen to be Native American-owned. And so Native Americans show a great deal of availability because you have this very successful Native American-owned construction business out in the marketplace that's doing that work. So in the case of Native Americans, that availability is largely driven by a single firm, which isn't uncommon as part of disparity studies, but it becomes a little more common when you're dealing with smaller municipalities like we are with the city of Asheville. So in the case of Native Americans, that helps explain why availability might look so high.
Okay, that's good. Let's keep going.
All right. So once we completed the utilization analysis and the availability analysis, that put us in position to really compute what's the crux of the disparity study, which is the disparity analysis, to assess whether there are any differences between participation and availability on city contracts. So in order to conduct the disparity analysis, we use a relatively simple metric. We use what's called a disparity index or a disparity ratio. So for a particular set of contracts and for the groups that we looked at, we took the dollars that a particular group actually received on city contracts, and we divided it by the dollars we would expect them to receive based on our availability analysis. And that equals the disparity index or ratio. So a disparity ratio of 1 indicates parity. In other words, participation is largely in line with availability. A disparity index of less than 1 indicates a disparity, and then a disparity index of 0.8 or less indicates a substantial disparity or substantial underutilization. That threshold is important because courts use the threshold of 0.8 or less to indicate an inference of discrimination against particular groups out in the marketplace, and those substantial disparities often serve as justification for a municipality or another organization to take relatively strong measures to help address those barriers. So things like minority and women-owned business goals or other race and gender-conscious program measures. So looking at the results for all the city's contracts considered together, I'll point out some things on this chart. First, if you can see my mouse cursor here, you'll see a solid line drawn at 100. That's the line of parity, which means that participation is in line with availability. You've got a line drawn, a dashed line at 80, which is the threshold for substantial disparities. And then you've got all of our groups shown here on the left. All minority and women-owned businesses at the top, and the individual racial, ethnic, and then white women-owned businesses at the bottom. So, looking at the data for all contracts considered together, the first thing you should know is that the disparity index for all minority and women-owned businesses considered together is 82, which is right around the threshold for what one would consider a substantial disparity. What that means is that for every dollar we would expect minority and women-owned businesses to receive from our availability analysis, they actually received about 82 cents of those dollars. So they're showing a disparity. And then below that, highlighted in red, we show all the substantial disparities for the individual groups. So Asian American-owned businesses, Black American-owned businesses, and Native American-owned businesses all showed substantial disparities. Hispanic Americans showed a disparity index above parity, as did non-Hispanic white woman-owned businesses. Any questions on those results? So we also looked at results broken down, in this case, by construction and non-construction. So again, I mentioned earlier that the majority of the dollars that we examined as part of the disparity study, more than 2/3 were construction dollars. And then non-construction, because there's such small populations of contracts we combined. That includes professional services, goods, and general services. So we showed results here separately for construction and non-construction. Construction will be shown in a lighter gray bar, and non-construction contracts will be shown in the darker gray bar. So considering the construction contracts first, what you see is a disparity index overall of 129. So minority and women-owned businesses considered together actually show a disparity index of parity on construction contracts. But that's driven primarily by participation by Hispanic American-owned businesses and non-Hispanic white woman-owned businesses. You still see substantial disparities in construction for Asian American-owned businesses, Black American-owned businesses, and Native American-owned businesses. It's quite a different story when you look at non-construction contracts, where minority and women-owned businesses are actually showing much worse outcomes on those non-construction contracts. That's where you see substantial disparities across the board. So all minority and women-owned businesses show a disparity index of 41 on non-construction contracts. And if you go down from there, you see Asian Americans with a disparity index of 0, Black Americans with a disparity index of 16, Hispanic Americans a disparity index of 56, Native Americans a disparity index of 9, and white women-owned businesses a disparity index of 64. Any questions I can answer about those results?
No, keep going.
Okay. So that brings us to some high-level considerations that we considered and present to the city as ways that they can refine program measures that they're currently using, as well as considerations they can make to further encourage the participation of minority and women-owned businesses and small businesses into the future. So first, I want to begin by talking about contract notification. So I will say that Brenda's team, or at least Brenda's former team, as small as it is, made a lot of efforts in terms of connecting with the community and helping them compete for contracts with the city, primarily in a race and gender neutral way. Although one comment that did come up throughout in-depth interviews that we conducted throughout the marketplace with business owners was that some business owners indicated that they're often not aware that there are city contracting opportunities that they might be available for, that they might be able to compete for. So looking at what the city's doing in terms of making sure they're getting the word out to different segments of the business community and different business groups might be a worthwhile endeavor, just making sure that we're hitting on all the different groups of minority and women-owned businesses throughout the 10-county marketplace and beyond. The city might also want to look at efforts we make to better engage with local businesses. So one thing that is somewhat unique to the city's disparity study, especially its availability analysis, is that the city's sending out a lot of dollars even beyond its 10-county market area. So particularly in professional services, we actually had to include Mecklenburg County in the relevant geographic market area for architectural and design contracts, only because just by studying the 10-county area surrounding, including Buncombe and the surrounding counties, we couldn't cover enough of the dollars that were actually going to local businesses in professional services contracts. So the city may want to explore ways it can connect with local A&E firms, other professional service firms, and really dig into and better understand why are dollars going to Charlotte businesses is it the case that there really aren't professional services businesses located in Asheville or the surrounding marketplace? Is it the case that there are some bigger firms out in Charlotte and the city has gotten comfortable with using them? But it certainly knows well to assess that question and figure out whether there are things that the city can do to better connect and engage with local businesses as opposed to relying on the Charlotte marketplace as well for particular contracts. Another issue that came up pretty often and is something that comes up all the time as part of our work are issues with prompt payment. So as I mentioned several times before, a disproportionate percentage of minority women-owned businesses are small in size and are small businesses. And one thing that is critical for those firms is to have capital on hand to be competitive, not only with their work at hand, but also to their marketing efforts and other efforts that it takes to start up new projects. And having that capital on hand is severely limited when they are experiencing if they have to experience large delays from getting paid, either directly from the city or having to wait for a prime contract to be paid and then going through even more delays for the prime to pay that on what they would have done as well. So making sure the city taking steps to make sure that it's enforcing prompt payment policies, working, if possible, to refine those prompt payment policies and making sure they're aggressive enough so that small businesses get their hands on their money as quickly as they can so that they can continue making payroll and have enough capital at hand to be successful on other projects as well. Information from the disparity study also helps inform annual goal setting. So the city does set aspirational goals each year that aren't necessarily based on something as precise as the availability analysis, but often organizations like the city will use availability results across different contracting categories to help understand what their aspirational goals might be and what might be the most realistic goals for them to set moving forward. So we would strongly urge the city to consider information from our availability analysis as well as the information we have about conditions that minorities and women face in the local marketplace that we summarize as part of the disparity study report in setting its next overall aspirational goal so that those goals might better reflect the minority and women-owned businesses out in the marketplace. And then finally, another thing the city could consider is the use of race and gender conscious program measures. So lots of organizations all across the country use contracting goals on specific contracts that they award so that prime contractors have to either meet those goals through subcontracting commitments with minority and women-owned businesses, or they show good faith efforts to try to meet those goals and fail to do so, and then the city has the ability to accept those good faith effort waivers as part of the goal process or not. But it's something that the city of Charlotte is doing, something that one of our clients in the city of Denver and the city of Virginia Beach are doing as well. And certainly the disparities that we see as part of the city's disparity study, should they choose to use contracting goals moving forward, those disparity study results certainly seem to indicate substantial disparities for many of those groups. So it's certainly something that I think the city would be justified in thinking about.
So my question on that is, are we legally allowed to do that? You said the city of Charlotte does it, so maybe we are, but I mean, there's so many things we can't do in terms of requirements for our contractors.
Yeah, so that's certainly a question that is probably better asked with our legal consultant talking to city council, only because I can only pretend to speak like a lawyer so far. So I don't feel necessarily comfortable saying that you're legally to do it. I will say that I know that Charlotte's done it or does do it, and they include meeting those goals as part of their definition of being responsive on construction, responsible and responsive as part of construction contracts, but certainly something that our legal consultant and BDC can work with your with your legal counsel on and try to answer some of those questions. Within North Carolina, there are certainly other organizations besides Charlotte that use race and gender conscious goals as well. So NCDOT uses goals. They in fact were sued over the use of those goals some years back. Their program was largely allowed to remain in effect with some refinements. It was more of an implementation issue than it was the goals themselves were unconstitutional. But as I said, something we can certainly work with on with the city lawyers.
Yeah, I think that would be a key question to find out. Other questions?
The only thing I would say is when this comes to council, kind of the game plan as to how we're gonna, what the city's gonna do with this, and what the solutions are. Because I don't think that these results probably came as a big shock to anyone. But so in addition to the report, I'd love to hear sort of what the plan is, even if we don't have a plan yet, what the plan is to have a plan.
We do have a plan. We will be updating the minority business program about those. Samir and I talked about having sections of the plan right now is legal stuff, a bunch of stuff. What we want is something that a contractor, if you get a plan, a contractor can use it, a sub can use it, a city staff person can use it, the city can use it overall. So we'll be, Rosanna and myself and UBC will be working on that going forward. We also have a couple of things that are coming up that I'll advise council of when we get there, like our Mount Community Capital Fund is getting ready to launch. We also have DOT is looking at coming to the Western region to do their contractors college. So that'll be, they have strong, in terms, they use their own certification, they know what they have here in the region, that will be very beneficial for us. And so, and Rosanna and I have talked about a major marketing campaign that will be ongoing to get vendors into the city to do business, and take a different holistic approach from the city. So we'll talk a little bit about that when we come. Great questions, thank you so much. All set?
All right, thank you so much, Samir. Appreciate all your work.